Well, some of you have been here for a few days. I hope you've been able to learn some Portuguese words and some Azorean, which in Portuguese would be bom dia. Can you say that? It's not bom dia. It's not a bomb. Okay, it's bom. You don't read the M. You just sound it. Bom. That's why we have big noses. Bom. Right. So welcome to this second day of this conference. I hope you enjoyed the evening. I hope you had a nice rest because we've got an incredible day again. And the first session of today will approach an issue, an attitude that can be a real game changer in all of this process. And it's called sustainable and responsible procurement. And who best to come and lead this session than Mr. Randy Durband, the CEO of GSTC. Mr. Randy, good morning. Could you come up to the stage? Please do. Ready for it.
Well, good morning. I fear you're probably tired of me by now, but here I am. No? Oh, how sweet. Sustainability, many people say, is love. Before we get started on this topic, I'd like to cover a couple of things. Roy, do we have this queued up with the, do we have the presentation ready, the slides? We have on Facebook live streaming, and we have the hashtag GSTC2019. So please post Facebook and throughout social media about these events. So just wanted to make sure that you saw that to post back home to everybody what you're doing here. Also wanted to mention this is that our friend Kirsi, working in the Balkans in Southeast Europe, has very kindly coordinated the translation of the GSTC criteria into several Southeastern Europe Balkan languages. So thank you very much, Kirsi. We want to acknowledge that. That's going up live on our website. Thank who else? A team, I'm sure. There you are. Thank you kindly. Stand up, please, if we could. So I mentioned yesterday that we do all the technical work on the criteria in GSTC in English to have the standard language, but we try to translate the criteria into many, many languages. And we just asked some experts who are good linguists to have at least 2 people for peer review of the translation, and we'll put it up. So it's not kind of official documentation for technical work, but very helpful from a training perspective. The other point related to that is that we're a network. We have a small staff, small team. We're dependent upon our success and our impacts by our members and our friends helping us out on things like that. So we just seek any sort of support, things like translation of criteria into whichever language you want to translate it into. We embrace and welcome that. We have most of the major languages of the world covered, but to the degree that you'd like to be involved in that, that would be very much appreciated and helpful. And just in general, and all the work we do of spreading the word of everything we're trying to do, you play an important role in making this all happen. One other topic before we started, we're very excited after much discussion for really a few years and deep thought and analysis. Our friends from Japan, the Japan Travel Agency, have an important announcement to make. So before we call our panel, could I kindly call Professor Kumi Kato and Ms. Minako Okada to the stage. And we have some very interesting news that we'd like to announce. Graham Miller, could you come and join us? And Mihi Kong, Director of Asia Pacific for GSTC. So if you could just kindly come and stand towards the center. Come on, don't be shy. Why don't you stand here? Yeah. So we're pleased at GSTC to announce that the Japan Tourism Agency, which is actually a public authority, has committed to formally adopt the GSTC destination criteria as part of its national tourism policy. Japan has ambitious plans. Japan has ambitious plans to grow tourism arrivals and is determined to do it in a sustainable way. So to that end, the adoption of the GSTC destination criteria is a major commitment and active leadership, and one they don't take lightly. They studied and analyzed this deeply for a good deal of time. So Professor Kumikatsu of Wakayama University, Minako Okada of JTB Tourism Research and Consulting have been the two lead people on a committee of, I think, about 30 of you, something like that, studying this issue over the course of much time with incredibly hard work towards getting to this position. And we've had long discussions on it. So they'll be using the destination criteria initially to send a survey to all municipalities in the country to order and assess the current understanding of sustainability, and then from there to launch a series of training workshops to drive up the level of expertise throughout Japan. So we at GSTC are just delighted with this new partnership. We congratulate you for your commitment and efforts, and we're just delighted that GSTC is going to be inherently built into the national tourism strategy of Japan. So thank you very much. Photographer, could we do the official photography, please?
Maybe we have to go.
Where would you like this?
Perfect, right there.
Good, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Careful stepping down. Okay, now let's get on to the topic of this morning. So if I could kindly call up our panel for the topic of sustainable procurement. We have Jane Ashton, Luis, Alex. If you could kindly join us on the stage. Why don't I take the seat on this side? I'll take this seat if you just sit anywhere else. Sorry. There we go. Are we ready for the handheld? Thank you very much. So, as you can see the names and the faces on the screen, we have Jane Ashton, the Director of Sustainability from TUI Group. We have Luis Blanco from Costa Rica, and he's going to speak from behalf of his own travel company, but it also is engaged very much with CST, which is Costa Rica's national certification of businesses scheme that's been in place for many years, really quite an interesting system. So we'd like you to be talking about both your perspectives as a business person working on sustainability in Costa Rica, but in the interaction with the CST program. And then Alexandra, I'm sure I haven't practiced your surname, Pastollnigg? Is that close enough? Thank you. She's with Voyage. She's been doing a lot of research on sustainability issues. So as we look at issues of sustainable procurement, supply chain development, I think we've got a nice array of, Jane comes from the mega company with many branches, the TUI Group holding with many different elements, and they're working in sustainability in so many different facets. And someone who's been thinking and teaching about these issues, and somebody who's practicing on a different level than TUI. So I think we've got a great cross-section of people. So I'm going to cue this up with a few thoughts on kind of where we see this going with GSTC. So we titled these words, this session, Sustainable and Responsible Procurement. And a little bit of a wordplay here, a little bit of a game, because what we're really going to talk about in this session is supply chain development. And the reason I use the term procurement is I want to challenge you this morning to think about expanding your view of procurement and kind of linking these concepts together. And hopefully you'll see what I have in mind as I kind of go through this. So if you look at this slide, I think I mentioned that FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, was really one of the first entities in the world of sustainability. They were created in 1993 to put eco-labels on the sustainable production of wood and paper. Some of you may have heard them. They've got some market penetration, a little bit of consumer awareness, very little. The point is that they've been around as long as anybody doing this sort of thing, and their market penetration of consumer awareness remains very, very small, with 26 years of engagement. But the driving force is a B2B framework. Kimberly-Clark, one of the largest producers of paper in the world, and they're global, has embraced FSC in a significant way. So I've been living in Thailand for the last few years. I'm in transition to Korea, but in Thailand, if you've been to Bangkok or Thailand, you know every 30 meters there's a 7-Eleven, right? All the toilet paper I've ever seen in Thailand has FSC Eco label on it. And why? Because the 7-Eleven Corporation in Thailand buys all of their paper products from Kimberly-Clark. And Kimberly-Clark, at a multinational global level, has gone in deeply on FSC. Yesterday, the session that Xavier Font led, there was some discussion about, you know, can we really make a breakthrough to the consumer to push them to buy a sustainable product? And I think there was a lot of consensus that now we really need to work on the B2B play because we're so far from the consumer. I feel very strongly that we're so far from the consumer on this play that we've really got to push, and we've got to make our supply chain sustainable and make the product, whether visibly or invisibly, sustainable in the supply chain. Anybody like me from America, we don't call tissue paper, we call it Kleenex because Kimberly-Clark has just dominated the scene so much. It's Kleenex, it's not tissue. So to have that level and things like toilet paper in Thailand, it's global. And so this level of commitment is amazing. So even in societies where they're not doing so well in recycling and on awareness sustainability, because Kimberly-Clark makes that commitment, many people are buying products that are more sustainable today than they were 20 years ago. So I think that this push to the consumer is really essential, and I think it provides guidance to where we need to go in our industry. So when we talk about SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the production of products and the consumption of them. And so usually in travel, we start, when we think about procurement, we're thinking about hotels buying food and beverage and the cleaning supplies and construction materials and all the maintenance equipment and so forth. And many hotels do quite well at that. They've got good procurement policies. I think there's been much greater awareness and growth in making it more sustainable in recent years. So that's what we usually think about procurement. Here's an interesting thing that our friends from WWF, I'm guessing it's people in the room, Jim and Tanya, because it says WWF USA, has been involved with Spain's Iberostar hotels to set some targets. Look at this, it's just November 11, quite recent, that they've got some targets set in their procurement that are based on the labels we've talked about, Marine Stewardship Council, Aquaculture Stewardship Council, MSC, and ASC. This is the kind of procurement that we'd like to see at GSTC in travel and tourism, is that third-party certified basis, verified product and service. In this case, it's about product. But what about services, and what about buying space in other businesses? That's where we can really make a mark here and move things in the style of Kimberly-Clark. This is what I think we can do in travel and tourism. Here's an example. This interesting company in Canada, it's mostly an Eastern Canada market, even with a French name, Transat. Is that how you pronounce it, I guess, in Quebecois? Very interesting company with an interesting business model. They're a very progressive company. I don't know of another company in North America that's much more progressive than this. They use virtually all sustainably certified hotels in their product line. And much of their product is to take Eastern Canadians to the Caribbean and to Mexico, and they use blue flag beaches. This is very progressive. So this is a way that they can really quantify or qualify the destinations they go to and the hotels that they use that are certified sustainable. What if all tour operators in the world really pushed this kind of agenda? And we push the hotels in that direction. So, it's a great model. They're GSTC members, and I think it's just a great thing. Now, they just got acquired by Air Canada. So will Air Canada maintain the culture and that orientation? Well, I have no idea, but it's frustrating, that who knows where this goes. So some progressive people at this brand did this, and they've been doing it for several years, and we'll hope that that culture continues. At a very large scale, and this is why we have Jane here, because TUI Group has been doing this sort of thing, and we'll let Jane talk about this in more detail, but they've set these goals that they want, was it 10 million holiday makers per year are staying in a certified hotel? By 2020, yeah. And so what they've done is so they've encouraged hotels and made it especially hard push on their owned and operated hotels to get certified. So I think you're at about 83% at the moment. This report just shows 81% from 2018, somewhere in there, or low 80s. So they've been making steady progress at getting their owned and operated hotels all sustainably certified. So they're using this framework as a way to verify that their supply chain is more sustainable. And then our friends at WWF signed this very interesting agreement with Royal Caribbean almost 3 years ago now. They're deep into a 5-year commitment where WWF is supporting Royal Caribbean on the greening of their operations. And they have many pieces to it. There are carbon reduction targets for the operations of the ships, but I put a couple up here that are relevant to the topic that we're covering here, is that in their procurement, they've set policies using the MSC label to say that they want on all of their ships and all of their brands, and it's the second largest holding company of cruise lines in the world, Royal Caribbean, many brands, many ships. So this is a very significant purchasing piece, that 90% of the seafood by the end of next year will be sustainably labeled by MSC. And there's GSTC. This is the first in our history formal use since we launched accreditation, and we could use that as a filter for certification bodies that we've accredited that are verified as good third-party certification. And so they don't have specific targets on the number of tour operators. They set a target of the number of tours operated by certified tour operators, but they've given preferential contracting to tour operators that are certified sustainable. Their policy right now is that when they're getting bids for a tour operator to do a shore excursion at one of their hundreds of ports around the world, that if price and quality are similar between the local companies that are bidding for the contract, they're going to choose the one that's certified sustainable. And so this has been going on for 2.5, 3 years now, and it's really an exciting development because we've just seen at ports around the world these companies pushing to get certified, and that, we're passionate of the belief that if you're certified, you're probably operating more sustainably than you were before because the process drove you to improvement. And so for a company to either get the Royal Caribbean contract or to keep it, they're getting certified. So this is just a tremendous driver. So our accredited certification bodies that are certifying them have been very active and busy with that. So this is what we're hoping to have on a formal basis, on an ongoing basis, is these kinds of targets. So whether you just set it up loosely internally or do it very systematically like that sort of thing, this is what we really want to encourage businesses to do. WWF has been doing this for a long time on various issues. And I wish we had a nice, cleaner way to present the concept, but I encourage you to take a look at this TED Talk that I've got posted here. If you go into TED Talk's website and search on this topic or on the name of this WWF food expert, Jason Clay, he's a great speaker. I've heard him in person a couple of times, including at ISEAL Alliance conferences. And he's talking, this is about 8 or 10 years old, this TED Talk, and his topic is biodiversity. But in this 18.5 minutes, it's just, to me, one of the most fascinating 18.5 minutes you'll view on sustainability. He talks about WWF's approach at working on these kinds of solutions. So his topic there is about biodiversity, but he describes this strategy where when WWF is working on a certain environmental problem, they map out who are the key producers that are have influences in sensitive areas on biodiversity, right? Or on certain species of wildlife or whatever. So whatever problem area they're working on, they study where's the problem and who are the producers of some economic activity that are harming that environmental element, if you follow. So they map out who are the producers that are impacting this and perhaps causing harm through their production techniques. Then they look at the market size and they try to map out who are the producers that reach 25% of market share. So that could be 8 very large companies, it could be 18, whatever that number is. They, through experience of working this model, they have found that the number that gets them to 25% of market share is relatively small. It's a number they can manage, they can talk to people, right? If they can convince those 8 or 18 companies that have 25% of market share, their research has shown that they can basically get a pickup of about 40 to 50% of production has been influenced to be more sustainable if they can convince those companies to follow a certification process in whatever sector they operate in, whether it's palm oil or fish or wood or paper, whatever it is, okay? So it's a model that they've been working on and using for a quarter of a century that is pretty effective. If you go back to the Royal Caribbean thing with the tour operators, let's reflect upon this for a second. So let's say a tour operator, to get or keep the Royal Caribbean contract, they've gotten certified, and if you can at least come along with me and agree that certification probably made them operate more sustainably by pushing them through the holistic process. If they're more sustainably in their practices for this process, and they come and service a Royal Caribbean group on a Tuesday at their port, when they're servicing brand X the next day on Wednesday, do you think they'll be operating more sustainably or less sustainably than 2 years previous? I think they're going to be more sustainable, because if they altered their business practices to operate sustainably enough to get certified to service Royal Caribbean on Tuesday, then I think they're going to still be operating more sustainably on the Wednesday than they used to be, which is to say this process pushes the business to be more sustainable. That's how we go from 25% to 40 or 50%, right? Because the companies, the producers, in this case of a service, not a piece of paper or a coffee bean, but a service, an excursion with a bus, right? And the complexity of the supply chain that we deal with in our space, if they're operating more sustainably for Royal Caribbean on Tuesday, they're operating more sustainably for all their clients. This is where we can have great influence as a company. So in Transat of Canada is asking their hotels in the Caribbean to operate more sustainably. That hotel is operating more sustainably for all their guests. So you're making your own supply chain more sustainable, and you're pushing the world. And so I think this is the model. This is what's going to drive it. We can, you know the expression, bang your head against the wall, make a big effort to try to do something, and all you're doing is causing yourself pain. I think we're just going to cause ourselves pain by banging our head against the wall for the next 10 years if we think we're going to get at the consumer in a significant way. Whether it's rainforest, organics, coffee, or chocolate, or whatever kind of eco-labeling, any such eco-label in any sector, if they have any significant consumer awareness, it might be 1 or 2% of society after 30 years. So we could try, and let's go in that direction, but any success you would have of reaching the consumer could only happen if you get the brand out there and the mechanism out there through a B2B strategy. So if we want to push the world in the right direction and get to the consumer eventually, we have to have the structure in place in a measurable way. So this is our great hope, and this is what we're really working towards. So the key to these strategies are setting targets. It makes sense to, if we want to have a business in our supply chain certified, we can't expect them to do it tomorrow or next month. We find in our experience that a business that's very progressive and doing a lot of things well on sustainability, when they make a commitment to get certified, it's probably still going to take them a year because they've just got a lot of documentation and so forth, a few business practices to improve. Most businesses that are not so far along could take 2 or 3 years. So there's a time lag. So to make these things work, we have to set targets in the future to say, this is why I like this model that WWF worked out 3 years ago for Royal Caribbean supply chain to say, by 2020 we want this. Give them all time. You need that. You need reasonable timeline targets. And targets are important. They motivate people. We need clarity. If we just talk about operating more sustainably, and most of our stakeholders don't know what that means or have different conceptions of it, and I think we've all agreed here for the last day and a half that there's great confusion, people don't understand sustainability, we have to simplify it. And if we simplify the process by setting targets, I think we can really make some gains. Target setting works. So to summarize what I've been talking about, so our current priorities, what we're doing at GSTC at the moment in this space, is trying to convince tour operators to follow this, to buy hotel space that's certified, outbound tour operators to buy from local DMCs, and inbound tour operators that are doing this, cruise lines to follow the Royal Caribbean model. In fact, we got some traction on that. And thank you, Helen, for being here to represent CLIA, because Kelly Craighead, the new CEO of CLIA, CLIA is the Cruise Line Industry Association, the largest, the key trade association for cruise in the world. They all looked over the fence at what Royal Caribbean is doing and have been inspired and intrigued. And we've got a lot of cruise lines looking seriously at this right now, and CLIA itself, as a trade association, is looking at seriously at this to help encourage and inform their membership on it. So we could pick up other cruise lines doing the same type of thing, and what a powerful thing that would be if the many other cruise lines. Arantxa Garcia is here, part of Jane's story with TUI, working on this very much as well. So I think it's a great model, and I think if it works, we'll be on to something. So that's enough for me. Jane, could you take us through what you're doing at TUI along these lines? And it's, I think we had to switch PowerPoint decks for them, right? So you might give them a moment to switch to yours.
I think he's making some signs that need to...
No,
Oh, no.
No,
No,
you need
no.
to change to Jane's deck. Yours didn't fit onto mine, or the format was wrong.
Oh, sorry.
No, my format was wrong.
All right.
Not compatible. There we go.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Jane Ashton from TUI Group. To use Randy's phraseology, I've been banging my head against the wall for 10 to 15 years trying to make our supply chain more sustainable. So it's a real treat for me to spend a few days with you guys and have the opportunity to reflect back on where we've got to and listen to your ideas as how you think we're doing and how we can do better. TUI Group, a lot of you will be familiar with us, but quite a lot of you, I believe, aren't. So we're the world's largest integrated tourism business, comprising hotels, airlines, destination experience companies, cruise ships, and critically also major tour operators in most of the European Union's largest countries, so UK, Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, Nordics, etc. So we take over 20 million people on holiday a year, so a really massive impact, both directly through our own business, but particularly through our supply chain. And we manage that impact very much with strategies, public targets. As Randy said, that's a really critical way to drive practice and drive performance through a business like ours. We have our Better Holidays, Better World strategy. Sorry, there's no dates in there, but we launched that in 2015, and that expires next year, 2020. The areas there align very closely with the GSTC criteria, and GSTC is certification bodies are absolutely critical in helping us drive performance and achieve those targets. So Step Lightly is all about reducing our environmental impact there. We have targets to particularly drive down our carbon impact across all the elements of our business, hotels, airlines, coach fleets, brochures, retail estates, head offices, etc. So that's particularly within the hotel area, then that's really helped with certification. Make a difference, that's all about driving positive change through our supply chain. Our headline target here, and these aren't our only targets, there's a plethora of targets underneath that, but our headline target there was to deliver 10 million greener and fairer holidays, as we call them, by 2020 per year, enabling more people to share in the benefits of tourism. So we classify a greener and fairer holiday as a customer staying in a hotel which is certified to a GSTC recognised certification body. Lead the way, that is primarily driven through our TUI Care Foundation. Our pledge there was to be investing 10 million euros per year into projects and initiatives that drive sustainable tourism, particularly through the TUI Care Foundation. There are projects which are helping support our wider supply chain and destination value chain. So projects which fund vocational training for underprivileged youth in developing countries, projects focused on regenerative farming and making linkages between those farmers and the hotel chain, etc. So that's our strategy. This is how we're doing on the Make a Difference key performance indicator. If you recall, our target there was by 2020 to be taking 10 million customers to certified hotels. And we weren't starting in 2015, as you can see. By 2015, we already had cajoled 950 of our major suppliers, hotel suppliers, to become certified. And that's grown every year, as you can see. Literally hot off the press, in figures which we'll be releasing formally next week, we have actually already overachieved on our 2020 target. This financial year, which ended, this was actually up to the end of October 2019, we took 10.2 million customers to certified hotels. So that is now over 50% of all the customers that we handle. In fact, it's much more than 50% because of the 20 million people that we're taking on holiday a year. There are also people that are just buying, say, transfers or flights from us, etc. So we're getting there. It's very much a journey and still some way to go. But how do we persuade hotels to become certified? We've been actually working on that for a good 10 to 12 years. And in the early years, it was very much encouraging, asking, cajoling, supporting hoteliers to certify, and not a lot happened. So we took the step, probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, to incorporate a contractual obligation. If people wanted to sign a contract with TUI Group Purchasing, they had to commit to subscribe to a GSTC recognised certification body and work towards certification during the period of that contract. And that again, hoteliers will sign that and agree to that, but it still takes a huge amount of work to persuade them to actually go through with it. So that process is managed as we would manage any other business process, in terms of targets, in terms of training, in terms of management information. So our purchasers will all be targeted on working with their suppliers to ensure that they start that journey. The purchasing board will get the information on certification on a monthly basis, which chains we still need to work with, which destinations we still need to work with. We work to support the hotels with lots of materials and also destination workshops on anything from reducing food waste to reducing plastic waste to energy conservation, to general certification workshops, benefits of certification. So no preferential contractual rates as such, but a lot of support and a contractual obligation. We also undertake to highlight certified hotels in our brochures. We have search mechanisms on the website so people can select more sustainable hotels. They are sadly underused. Even in markets like the Nordics, where we know that consumer awareness is at an all-time high, it's sky high, and yet those search buttons are underused. So it really links back to Javier's point yesterday, that you can't wait for the customer to drive this. At point of holiday purchase, they really are not thinking about sustainability. It's much more of a sort of decision that's made on price, on availability, on destination, on quality, etc. So we have to introduce sustainability at other points of the customer journey when they're not so focused on just getting their holiday booked. So it's much more of a sort of choice editing approach. But it has become easier, and the reason it's become easier is because as we've been doing this over the years, we've seen some really clear business benefits, which gives our people internally the confidence to persuade the hoteliers of the business benefits. So I just wanted to share these with you. Some of you might have seen these statistics. We made these public about a year or so ago. Just to talk about the sort of base of this, for about 400 hotels, about 360 hotels actually, which we term TUI hotels and resorts. They're actually hotels where we either have some ownership involvement, or we have management involvement, or we have long-term contractual agreements. They are sort of what we call our concept hotels, or a mixture of all those. So we're able to compare those hotels that were certified versus those hotels which weren't certified. And you can see there very clear performance indicators for certified hotels: lower CO2, lower waste, lower fresh water usage, high use of green energy, higher employment of national employees. And what's really, really critical for us as a business as well, in terms of our own benefits, I guess, or which are our customers' benefits, is that those hotels had demonstrably higher quality and higher customer satisfaction scores. So really, more sustainably run hotels are just a higher quality experience. For this conference, I just looked at another metric, which was, as we now have 4 or 5 years of data, how does certification drive ongoing performance? Part of we monitor the 360 hotels roughly that we control, and we have a whole set of KPIs that we collect on an annual basis from those hotels, and actually more frequently now going forward we'll collect those KPIs. But that data set, those hotels, that set of hotels is a movable feast. There's hotels going out of the portfolio, hotels coming into the portfolio. So what I did was actually compare a set data set from the same 334 hotels over that 5-year period. So, 234 hotels were in that data set in 2015 and still are in that data set. And I think this is really exciting. Sorry if you think it's boring. I think it's really, really exciting, because those are the same hotels, many of which were certified because their own hotels were certified in 2015, more of which are certified now. But you can see during that period how ongoing certification has really helped drive down those environmental impacts. So for me, this slide and the previous slide are absolute proof that certification is not just a box-ticking exercise, that it drives real performance, and really quite dramatic performance. It's pretty difficult to persuade a hotel to change its impacts to that degree over a few years. So I think this is tremendously exciting. And so having this set of benefits, which saves a huge amount of costs for the hoteliers, which is massively important in terms of quality and satisfaction for TUI as a business, has helped us with our new flagship brand, TUI Blue, which launched 100 hotels, launched a couple of months ago. This is a sustainability strategy which we launched at the conference with all 100 hoteliers. We have there 90% of them have to, with it by 2020, have achieved GSTC recognition certification. That's not because we don't want 100%, it's because we know that there'll be more hotels coming into the portfolio, so it's a more realistic target. All of these targets will be aided by achieving GSTC certification, but we've also got some hard figures below that. And what was really interesting to me was not one hotelier had an issue with it. They all embraced it. They were all convinced of the business benefits, and all convinced that as part of launching a quality flagship hotel brand, sustainability absolutely had to be part and parcel of that. It's not a niche issue. It's something that is part of a quality brand. So So yeah, I think we've come a long way, and having those stats and that business proof is really helping. And so yeah, we'd like to spread the word on that. And yeah, to sum up, waiting for customers to say, customers say they want a more sustainable holiday experience, but waiting for them to make that choice and waiting for hotels to voluntarily embrace that choice is we haven't got enough time. We need to move faster than that, and that's why I'd love to see more companies including certification as a contractual must in their business practices.
Beautiful, thank you very much. Luis, please.
Good morning. Thank you from the GSTC organization to invite me. Well, at the beginning, I will to speak just a little from the certification from Costa Rica. Since 1998, there is in Costa Rica the certification for sustainable tourism, we call CST, which is paid by the government. Is the specific, the government impulse and pay for us. Travel Excellence is certified since 2007, and in 2010 we reached the highest level. In the previous models, there are 5 levels. We name all of them with leaves. The first level is one leaf, and the second 2 leaves. And we reached the higher level in 2010. And in 2018, the Costa Rican Tourism Board launched the new version of this program, the CST 2.0, and which comply with the Global Sustainable Tourism Council criteria. We are expecting that the GSTC accredited that at least the...
That's the plan.
Yes. The Costa Rican tourism manager, he told me that they are expecting that. Costa Rican certifications can benefit from being recognized by the GSTC. Our certification CST evaluates the performance on 3 levels: internal management, requirements, continuous improvement, and external impact. The CST requests policies or agreements established and documented according to the type of supplier, which detail and communicates the sustainability requirements requested in the development of business management of the socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental impact areas for the delivery of goods and the execution of the services. Suppliers are subject to training in sustainable matters. The Costa Rican Tourism Board offers a discount for the international trade fairs to the certified business. In the last scheme, we are in the transition. They offer the 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100% according with the level, with the leaves. And in the actual scheme, we are only 2 levels, the basic and the elite. And for the first one, the government offers the 60%, and from the elite, they offer the 100% discount. In our company, okay. In our company, we are always seeking for commercial partners ruled by ethics, community awareness, and environmental commitment. At Travel Excellence, we have developed the Quality and Social Responsible Handbook for Suppliers, this one. in which we establish our expectation from them, but we also provide guidance and additional references for them to achieve and exceed our standards. In this handbook, we include expectation about quality of service, and in this case, we focus on visitors, respectful treatment, communication about improvements, report of incidents, and continuous improvement. For the second one, commitment to organization governance, we do the information and try to do more information in order that they can create their own policies or their own practices. There's policies and legal compliance. At the third one, commitment to human rights, sexual exploitation of children and teenagers, care of people with disabilities, and not discrimination. Commitment to work practices, compliance with labor legislation, action against sexual harassment, health and safety at work, and training. Commitment to the environment, mitigation of environmental impacts, sustainable use of resources, environmental protection and biodiversity. Commitment to fair operation practice, anti-corruption, respect for trade agreements, and confidentiality. Commitment to consumer affairs, ethical market, prevention of accidents, safety equipment, and emergency response. Financial responsibility in case of accidents. And the last one, commitment with active participation to community development, respectful relationship with the communities. So we think that helping the suppliers to be sustainable tourism companies consists in convincing them about the importance of having good practices and providing them with the guides to do it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So 5 tiers, and they get the discount at each tier. It goes to ITB Berlin and other trade shows to get the discount? Anywhere, any international trade show. Very progressive. So just to be clear, you caught on that. So they've got 5 levels, and as a business gets certified at each level, they get a 20% discount off buying their share of a little desk at a pavilion at ITB or any trade show. So obviously the government has to have some kind of funding mechanism for that subsidy, but what a great progressive idea. And it's a carrot instead of a stick. It's a financial reward for marketing for getting certified. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Alex. I'm the founder of Voyage. Yesterday, someone in the audience at one of the panels asked the question, where are the startups in the room? Here they are. So big credit to Randy and the GSTC. Thanks a lot for giving me, as a young startup founder, a voice here at your conference. I'm a newcomer in sustainable travel. I only entered the industry less than 3 years ago. I know a lot less about sustainability on the ground than all of you in this room do. But what I can do is share my perspective from the markets, from the consumer side, and maybe also the investment side of things. Before I start, I feel I have to give you a little bit of background on my story so you can place me and you can understand where I'm coming from. I come from banking. Finance is my background. And a few years ago, I thought, just as a traveler, it would be really cool to spend my vacation in Africa and climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And if anyone in the room here has done this before, you will know that booking a trip to East Africa and doing one of these trips is a nightmare. And somehow I became a little bit obsessed with my Kilimanjaro climb. And I became obsessed with understanding how the Kilimanjaro industry works, and I decided to write a book, and so I did a lot of research. And I became aware of the exploitation of porters working on Mount Kilimanjaro. The situation is fast that they don't get paid what they're promised, they have substandard equipment that doesn't protect them against the harsh mountain climate, and if they get sick or have an accident, they may not get assisted with descent. And on Mount Kilimanjaro, not getting assisted with descent if you have an accident means that we are playing with human life. That was my introduction to sustainability in travel. But here's the good news. Oh, sorry, one more thing. So because I was writing my book and when I came back home, I did more research. I wanted to understand what's going on. And I've realized that the companies responsible for the exploitation of human life, when you go on common traveler platforms, they only have 5-star reviews. You look up their websites, and you would think they're the most green and social companies ever. But here's the good news. At least for Kilimanjaro, there's a very good local non-profit organization, the Kilimanjaro Porters Assistance Project, and they run a really good independent audit program. They are monitoring every single climb of their partner companies. And so for Kilimanjaro, it's black or white. We can easily identify the ethical operators from everyone else. So I thought, okay, that's really interesting. On the one hand, it was really difficult for me as a traveler to book such a trip. On the other hand, it's actually quite easy to identify the sustainable companies with an independent audit. So why don't we create a solution that makes it easy for travelers to book such vacations, but only with independently verified, audited, sustainable companies? And that's how my story started and how I decided to leave my career and go into travel. And then we started to look bigger and look globally and look for similar audit standards and similar sustainability audits in travel, and that's what brought us to the GSTC, and that's how I learned about GSTC accredited audit standards. And so the work we are doing at Voyage is really trying to build a platform that makes it easy for travelers to book trips with verified, audited, sustainable companies. That's my story, and that's the work I'm trying to do. So let's start with the more interesting things, my observations over the last 2 to 3 years. The first observation, the first problem I saw is greenwashing, as we all know. And someone yesterday mentioned that we should involve travelers in the audits. Now let me tell you one thing. We are doing this with our trips. We are asking travelers when they come back, have you observed sustainability issues? And guess what they all say? Oh yes, my tour company is great, they put the rubbish down, leave no trace. And if they go on a safari, maybe they note that there is no plastic. But that's it. And you here know much better than I do that plastic and leaving no trace, these are maybe 2 of 80, 100 standards. Involving travelers is part of the solution, but it is not the solution. Believing that travelers can play sustainability auditors, that's greenwashing in itself. So I have become convinced, absolutely convinced, that without independent sustainability audits, there is no sustainability. And the solution is obvious. And all of you here in this room, you are the solution. You are conducting these independent sustainability audits. So the good news is the solution already exists. We don't even need to reinvent it. But now comes the next problem, and that is confusion. So trying to build our platform, I started by talking to local companies. And because my story started in East Africa, we started in Africa. And so I go to local travel conferences all over Africa and I speak to local companies. And guess what? With a few exceptions, and Kenya is one of the big exceptions because there's a big initiative there, none of the local companies have ever heard of the GSTC or any of your standards. And now I'm wondering, this is really interesting. If the local companies don't know about sustainability audits, then how serious are the big agencies and the big booking platforms really? How is it possible, if they are sustainable, that their local suppliers never heard about sustainability? And arguably there is one big exception, and Jane from TUI is here on stage. So TUI is one of these exceptions, but there's a lot of other international agencies out there, and they are not serious about sustainability yet. And so I'm starting to talk to international agencies back home. I'm based in Switzerland. And Switzerland, similar to the Netherlands and the Nordics, is supposedly one of the greenest and most sustainable countries on earth. Guess what? I talked to the travel leaders in Switzerland. They have never heard of the GSTC or any of your standards. And that's not even the biggest problem. Because the consumer demand, it doesn't really matter what you do locally in your destination or what your accommodation is doing or what the tour operator is doing, because the demand is controlled by platforms. That's the trend we're seeing. Consumer demand is moving onto platforms. And if you cannot sell your sustainability product on a platform, then maybe you can protect your own destination and you can do your little small work back home, but this is not going to move the needle in sustainability. And so I start to talk to big travel companies, big travel tech companies in these platforms. And I would like to quote one conversation to you that has really opened my eyes. And that was in confidence, one-on-one, not on a public stage, with a senior leader in one of the big travel tech booking platforms that are aggregating the hotel and flight bookings. And I say, you guys, you are controlling the consumer demand. If you are not integrating meaningful carbon offset in your checkout, who will? And you know the answer I got? He looks at me, and I believe he really cares, he really wants to do the right things. He looks at me and says, Alex, you have to understand, we are a publicly listed company. Sustainability is not our mandate, profitability is. And that was a wake-up call for me. I come from the finance industry. I should have known this, but I didn't. You know why I didn't? Imagine you're a senior decision maker in a big listed corporate, and you are aware that the market wants you to become sustainable. However, you have pressure from your shareholders. You need to earn profits all the time and have your profits increase. So what do? You use the least amount of budget to create some sustainability impact program, and then you put huge marketing around it. And that's what all of us are observing. We are seeing green news out there. We are seeing companies marketing sustainability. And I'm sorry to be the elephant in the room, but this is a colossal greenwashing scheme. We have a broken system. If I didn't see it, the masses of people don't see it. But there is hope, and the hope are consumers. I strongly believe the solution is to drive consumer demand to sustainable products. And it was said yesterday the consumers are not real and are not walking the talk. I don't fully agree with this. And I'm not even talking from my own experience as a small travel startup founder. I'm referring here to the big guys. Booking.com does annual surveys. In this year's survey of Booking.com, it shows that more than 70% of people want to stay in eco-friendly accommodations. But their survey of last year showed that more than 70% of people don't know how. We need to make it really easy and simple for consumers. And so I've actually become one of the GSTC's biggest marketeers. I'm running around and telling the world that you exist. But it's not easy. Just 2 weeks ago, we were hosting a sustainable travel workshop in Switzerland with people who really care. And they asked me, so how can I make sustainable vacations, sustainable travel decisions? And I showed them the GSTC website and your logos. And the feedback I'm getting is, it's too complicated. You need to understand, we consumers are getting bombarded by marketing messages and logos. It took me full time after leaving my career, more than 2 years, and I'm still not fully there, to understand the differences between all the logos and all the standards. How can we assume a consumer who has a busy life, a busy career, their own families, and now finally they go on their well-deserved vacation? How can we expect them to understand the differences? So there's a lot of problems, but I have a solution. I have a vision. Assume we need to create clarity for consumers. Assume we can create one logo, one vision, one marketing message, and collaborate here to make this marketing message go viral. Now, I understand you have your different logos and there is some competition. I'm not suggesting to replace that. I'm suggesting create one common standard that consumers can recognize with dual recognition and keep your existing logos. But let's collaborate on making this one vision, this one shared message. Let's create a short video and let's all collaborate and making this go viral. I can assure you, consumers will rally behind us because they're waiting for the solution. And look to the financial industry. We have independent financial audits, right? And all the big companies need an independent financial audit, and that's mainstream. And the big 4 audit firms in finance and small audit firms, they can coexist. You can also coexist. Currently, certification in travel is a niche, it's a tiny niche, and you're all fighting for this tiny little niche. Assume we can make this mainstream, then the bar is big enough for all of you. I have one last strong recommendation. Let us put our personal interests aside. Look, if I'm in the business of making sustainable travel easy, and what we're doing, it has a technology solution that will withstand, that will protect us, but it also has a sustainability solution. If we all here collaborate on coming up with this one logo and we make sustainable travel decisions really easy, I'm putting myself out of business, almost. But I don't care. This is not about me, it's not about you, it's about us. Scientists agree that we are very, very short, in a few years, we'll reach a point of no return. And then it's too late for all of us. It is absolute insanity to believe that the same old habits, the same old system will solve our problems. We cannot not take a risk and not collaborate. So let's do this, let us collaborate. Because you here, you in this room, you have the power to make sustainability in travel mainstream. You have the power to do that if we collaborate. And you have the power to not only do this in travel, but to set a signal for all industries that we need independent sustainability audits and standards to make sustainability go mainstream. Imagine a world where investors know where to put their money because there are independent audits, where consumers know where to put their money because of one shared logo. And that way we can make sure that the money trickles down to sustainable projects because the money knows what's happening on the ground through independent audits. That is the world I want to live in. This is how we will preserve our planet and implement the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you for your passion. I think it's shared. We didn't invite you to the stage because you're a startup. We invited you to the stage because we read in some blogs and your writing that we thought, let's get a fresh newcomer in with whatever perspectives. So thank you very much for those perspectives. All valid issues. So we see Slido is quite active. Jane, your name pops up frequently. I think I see about 17 questions. So let's get right to the audience because they're asking things that I very much had in mind. But I will frame up to kind of get you started, Jane. There is a question here is that, TUI Group is recognizing the hotels that are certified by a certification body that uses recognized standards but not accredited. And I think it's because you'd set targets for 2020 quite some years ago. Is that correct? Can you speak to that? Yeah, I don't think that one's on the screen, but we'll start looking at the screen. And by the way, it helps us, we have quite a few questions, so if you could grade some of your favorites to prioritize them, that would be helpful. A few of them are redundant, but let's try to sort it out. Please. The question is accredited versus recognized, and yeah. Jane sees the light. Please.
Yeah, I think we would welcome more certification bodies going for accreditation. At the moment, there aren't really enough. There's very few that are accredited. We've worked, the certifications that we work most with is, Travel Life in particular. We helped develop that from 2003 to 2007, and that's been our main partner, but we recognise all the other certification bodies as well. And really, accreditation in the long term has to be the logical step, because thereby all the audit processes are assured. But yeah, our current strategy is based on GST recognised, because that's where we were in 2015, and in the long term we'd like more certification bodies to go for accreditation.
So we'll look for a new set of targets in the next year.
Oh,
As 2020 comes to a conclusion.
Yeah, I can't promise you what we'll launch at the end of next year, but we definitely like the accreditation as well. As long as it's a realistic process in terms of, but as far as I'm aware, that is so.
Good. If we could stay with you, there's a pretty hard-nosed question there for you at the top.
What's that one?
About what about TUI cruises? Do you see?
How can we justify selling cruising? Well, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of TUI Cruises and the work that they do to try to ensure that that they're really using state-of-the-art equipment, launching LNG ships from 2024 onwards, looking at their comparative performance, which is all in the public domain. They really are driving down negative environmental impacts as far as essentially a sort of shining light in the cruising industry anyway, and trying to maximise the benefits on shore. So they're definitely doing as much as possibly can be done in terms of cruising to minimise the negatives and maximise the benefits. So
where are your ships flagged?
So,
which countries are the ships registered and flagged?
I think different countries.
Different countries,
yeah.
Because that's a real issue, I think, in the cruise industry. In all of the work we do, whatever sector, subsector, travel and tourism, my own personal observation is one of the biggest drivers in the whole world are European Union regulations. Because if a business has to function in the EU, it alters its business practices. So we need more governments with more regulations, because a business that operates internationally, like I was saying earlier, if you alter your business practices to get the Royal Caribbean contract, if you're operating in the European Union, you've got some carbon emissions targets, and so you have to alter your business practices for that. So even when you're operating outside the EU, it's changed your practices. So we need more governments around the world. We need some Asian governments. We need stronger for North America. These are some drivers. But well, what else do we have here?
Correlation between customer experience and satisfaction and certified hoteliers. Yes, I think the figures, one of the charts showed that, and that was not just a one-off piece of research. We've done that piece of research every couple of years over the last 10 years, and each time we've seen a positive correlation between customer experience and satisfaction and certified hoteliers versus uncertified. So yeah, that's absolutely definitely the case.
So let's turn to Alex. I see a question just popped up. How are you, Alex, going to make this work through sustainable procurement, the topic at hand of this session? Is that okay?
Sorry, I'm not seeing the question here. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, it's how are we going to make it work, what you're talking about, to drive the consumer through procurement practices of businesses?
Yeah, so our vision is to create one platform where the consumer can go to and can trust that these are verified sustainable products. But we are a small impact startup, and we need collaboration with all of you to make this happen. But I'm a strong believer that through procurement, to make this happen and to incentivize local suppliers to become more sustainable, we need to start with the consumer demand. We need to create one clear marketing message. Because when there is demand, there will be supply. When there is business benefit, companies will do it. And that is our concept.
I'm going to stand here because I see that on my phone it's not sorted by the volume, so I want to follow the screen. The third one, Jane, do you have stats on certification and financial performance?
Well, we know what our energy costs are, what our water costs are, and what, say, a 14% reduction in energy costs cumulatively every year over a 5-year period is worth to us, and that is a tremendous amount. I think energy costs are probably the second operational cost line on a budget sheet after employee costs. So it's really significant. So I certainly know what it costs, what it saves TUI, which has been tens of millions, and we report that on an annual basis. What sustainability initiatives have delivered to us in terms of cost savings, and that's just what we can track. But of course, it's not just TUI savings, there's savings across the whole supply chain. So yeah, water costs coming in, water costs, treating water costs and getting rid of water, that all costs. Energy costs are tremendous. Waste costs, so everything you can do to, food waste in particular, everything you can do to drive that down is a very, very clear and significant saving off the bottom line.
Okay, let's try to go quickly through some questions. We're out of time now, so let's try to do some short answers to a few of the questions because there's so many. The comment about next conference at a certified hotel. One of our hotels is the Tercera Mar that many of us are staying in, recently got certified by Travel Life. So that's exciting. Jane, question 1688 certified by whom? It's certification bodies with a recognized standard, right?
Yeah, so I think Lucas is here from Travel Life. I think about 900 to 1,000 would be certified by Travel Life. And the rest by the likes of EarthCheck, Rainforest Alliance, Green Key Global, Green Key Europe, just a plethora of recognised standards.
Can fees of certification be a barrier to move more middle and small companies in these schemes? Can we hear from Costa Rica about the cost of certification for small businesses in your country? Is that an issue? Is it a big challenge or a small challenge?
Hello. If there is a big business or not, there is the question. The sustainability.
Cost of certification for small businesses, is it a large barrier to certification or a small one? Is it a big issue to be able to pay for the certification?
Okay. For the hotels, there are a lot of them. Usually the biggest one, the bigger, they certified by their own, And for the small hotels, usually the Costa Rica, Tourism Board, they help them to certify. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I think it helps that, and the fact that they get rewarded by the discounts and the promotion, that's a financial piece that the government is helping with. But yeah, the core question is, to get the certification in the first place, is the cost getting in the way of more businesses going for certification?
Okay, no. There's a sustainability conscience in our country, and all of the tour operators and hotels and rental cars, we are looking for the certification in order to accreditate, but they are, in some cases, they don't need to participate in a international trade show, then they don't need the discount. They do it because we think that is important for the country.
Good. Can we scroll to more questions to the next screen? Again, I'm still having a hard time sorting by frequency. Thank you. Let's make this the final question. And Alex, if you could take this on, it says to Fair Voyage. You mentioned you should avoid confusion, yet there's a jungle of platforms like yours. Fortunately, there are other passionate people, but I think even the message that you're trying to get across the industry is related to this. So what is your reaction about, how can we bring clarity, both from the industry and people like you talking about it?
Yeah, and it's a very fair question. Even in the almost 3 years that I've been in this, I have come across a lot of these other platforms. I yet have to come across one that uses independent audits for their sourcing. Everyone is trying to reinvent the wheel If you want to do good, stop creating yet another logo and yet another platform and yet another sourcing standard. The standards are already here. These are the GSTC accredited standards and all the independent audit that already exist. Let's not reinvent the wheel. So I think we are different because we only want to promote independently verified audited suppliers. And the second difference is it's perseverance and skin in the game. It's not easy to do what we are doing, and I've seen it myself. We're facing a lot of resistance, and a lot of people come and go. So our difference is also our strong commitment, and that we are not giving up until we've created a change.
Very good, thank you. Later today, we've got our certification bodies that are present. We're going to continue with them alone in a room talking about branding and reducing confusion. So that's the topic that we're going to be addressing. So we're a bit out of time, but Ian, yeah, we promised you that you don't have to use Slido. So Ian Taylor of Travel Weekly, you get one question. No, take the microphone.
Randy, it'd be really good if you responded to Alex's demand, because it's an obvious demand that why not one logo. But I know there have been bodies like Tourism Concern in the UK, which is sadly gone now, and so on, that have been trying for years to get agreement on a single standard. And in a way, the GSTC could be a stepping stone to that, but potentially and so on. But so if you were just to respond quickly to Alex about the difficulties in getting there, that might be helpful.
Well, one of the difficulties is that when we came into existence, there were already 150 labels. And so what we did is try to sort that out by working towards an accreditation scheme as a means of sorting that out. And it took years to build a system, to build a very systematic approach. So now we're there. So now what we've said to those certification bodies that existed in the past that will co-brand. And we talk to national governments that really insist on having their national labels. We say make it compliant with GSTC so it can at least enter into these market access schemes on a B2B. But it is a huge problem of confusion. So what we need to do is have a coming together of everybody that's involved in certification bodies and understand, okay, you want to protect your brand and build your organization. Well, the consumer wants something else. We have to find a way to clarity. And it might help for us to get some very large players in the travel industry to just step up and help sort this out. And then on the cost side, a lot of the certification bodies, virtually all the certification bodies are struggling with scale. And so there's a cost side for them, and there's a marketing side for everyone. We have a problem, and so we're trying to work through solutions. We have to do this together. We don't have an enforcement mechanism to say to the world, this is what's going to happen. I think the greatest enforcement mechanism would be very large tourism enterprises studying this and looking at it, maybe trade associations taking a lead or something to help us sort this out, because we're trying to work with all the different labels and come up with a cohesive scheme, but we're an NGO that's suggesting and not enforcing. So I think some major procurement campaign through the industry from some of the largest players, that to me is the solution. So, big topic. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. We've gone over time, so I think we should stop there. Thank you very much.
So, big topics. We have a refreshment break until 11:25. All right. 11:25, back in the room, please. Other information, if anybody is thinking of their transfers, some for today or tomorrow, there's outside a desk by the coffee area where you can get that information about your transfers, and also in your hotels, there should be information about that. Okay, so new information. The panels will start at 11:15 and not 11:25. And remember, there's 2 session rooms, all right? So look for the topic that is interesting for you.